Hey guys, it's me, Kari. I am so sleepy. Brian and I went to the Bronx Zoo today and we had a great time, but we got too much sun and we're both exhausted. So I'm just, I took a nap before and I'm just kind of still in that weird, hazy, in between asleep and awake thing. But I thought I would read some more Dicey song to you guys. So here we go. Dicey wore her new jumper to school, and the bra, of course, but she almost didn't notice that anymore. You could get used to just about anything, she thought. Nobody noticed her new clothes, but then nobody noticed her much anyway, so she wasn't surprised. When she left English class to go to home ec, she saw Mina hanging around by the door. "Hey, Dicey," Mina greeted her. "Hey," Dicey answered, walking right on past Mina and her friends. Mina got the message all right. Dicey heard one of the other voices talk as the girls followed her down the hall, falling behind because she was hurrying. "I don't know why you're looking for honky friends," the voice complained. Dicey was hurrying to home ec class to get her seat in the back at a table by herself and to get her face all set and ready. They were starting a new unit today. Miss Eversley stood in front of the class wearing her usual dark suit and usual nylon blouse with her usual pin on the lapel of her jacket. Nutrition was the new unit. Dicey kept herself from groaning out loud. She could peel potatoes and fry an egg, and that was about it, and she didn't want to learn more. She could also, she reminded herself, figure out things to eat and cook them over an open fire. But still, she wished Maybeth could be here instead of her. Maybeth would like it and be good at it. She hoped Maybeth could get this far in school. Miss Eversley began to lecture about nutrition and food groups. Dicey sighed, opened her notebook, and began drawing a picture. In her picture, there was a little boat on an ocean without any land around. The boat's sails puffed out. Dicey put some high-headed clouds in the sky. She grinned and put a crab at the bottom under the water. The crab was staring up at the boat. Dicey decided not to put anybody steering the boat. She knew who it was anyway. Miss Eversley's voice droned on. Later, Jeff was waiting by the bicycle rack. Dicey thought he noticed her jumper but didn't say anything. He had a song for her, he said. Dicey stood in front of him, holding her books. He looked quizzically at her, as if there was something he wanted to say, but when she didn't, he began to sing right away. The song he had that day was called Pretty Polly. Dicey had heard this cruel song once before. "Polly, pretty Polly, won't you come and go with me?" he sang. His hands brought music out of the guitar. The story went on, and the man, Handsome Willie, killed Polly and rode away. Over mountains so steep and the valleys so wide. Jeff looked at Dicey, waiting. Finally he asked, pushing his dark hair from his forehead, "What do you think?" Dicey shrugged. "Don't you wonder why he killed her? What happened to him?" Jeff asked. "Yeah, I do," Dicey admitted. "So what do you think?" Jeff asked again. "I gotta go," Dicey said. Jeff shrugged. He was wearing a brown sweater with the kind of softly mixed greens and whites that was in the wool Graham bought for Dicey. "Heather. See you tomorrow, maybe." His gray eyes were concentrating on the face of his guitar. "Sure," Dicey said. Millie noticed her jumper and liked it and made kind of a fuss about it. Dicey thought, after all, she'd rather not be noticed. That afternoon there was another letter for Graham from the doctors in Boston, but this one was thin. Dicey wondered if Graham wrote answers to these letters. She wished she could read them, but she figured if it was anything important, especially good news, Graham would tell them all about it. Sammy came out to stand with her while she scraped. He told her about a couple boys in his class who had to stay in the principal's office almost all afternoon. They had tried to walk tightrope over the top of the swings, he reported. Everyone, he said, meaning all the teachers, got angry and scared. His own opinion was that since they had talked so much about it before they tried it, and had gathered a huge audience before they started shimmying up the large poles, they planned to get caught. "I wonder if I could do it," he wondered. "I've got pretty good balance. Don't you think I do?" "I think," Dicey said, picturing the 15-foot metal swing sets, "that if you ever talk like that again, I'll have a heart attack." She could see how it would look, Sammy's sturdy body and his head of yellow hair with his arms out to keep his balance, and falling onto the packed dirt. Seriously. "Okay, Dicey," he said with a smile in his voice. "We had a math test this afternoon," he added. Dicey took in the information. "They didn't do it on purpose, did they, to get out of the test?" "I think so," Sammy answered. "They're pretty tricky." "Did you ask them?" "Yep, after school. Ernie, he's the one who has all the ideas, didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. He's bigger than the rest of us. Miss Teeds never even caught on," Sammy said. "How was the test?" Easy, Sammy reported. Just before supper, Dicey asked James when he was going to begin working with Maybeth. James pulled his eyes up from the book he was reading, as if he couldn't remember what she was talking about. James, Dicey said. I'll do it, he said. Cripes, Dicey, give me a chance. I got the paper route and school and all. There's no hurry. The phone rang during dinner in the middle of a big conversation about chickens. Sammy was trying to persuade Graham that they would be smart to get some chickens. I'd feed them and everything. I'd collect the eggs, he promised. They could stay in one of those empty stalls, the chickens, not the eggs. Graham teased Sammy. You'd give them names, she told him, and then when it came time to eat one, you'd say, we can't eat Hercules. Sammy laughed. I wouldn't name a chicken Hercules, he said. I'd name it Miss Teeds. I wouldn't mind eating that chicken. I couldn't ever eat a creature named Miss anything, or Mister. You can't give chickens titles, boy. It's like naming one Queen Elizabeth or President Johnson. Johnson's not president anymore, Graham, James informed her. She fixed him with a beady glance, and her mouth twitched. Before he could say anything, the phone rang, and he ran to answer it. When he returned, he was running. It's Toby. He wants me to spend the night on Friday, can I? Graham asked him if he wanted to, and he said yes. She asked him where Toby lived, and he lived downtown. She asked him about what time, and he told her after school on Friday, and Toby's mother would bring him home Saturday afternoon. All this time, he was almost jumping with excitement. Graham asked him about his paper route. Sammy'll do it, won't you, Sammy? Sure, Sammy said. Sammy's too little, Dicey protested. Both Sammy and James protested that. Dicey looked at Graham for advice. Graham apparently agreed with the boys, and she gave James permission. He ran back down the hall to tell Toby, then ran back to the table, full of plans for what he'd take and what they might do. Dicey looked at him and couldn't tell what to think. She was glad he had a friend, but she had the feeling that he wasn't going to do much to help Maybeth, feeling the way he did. Her foreboding was correct. Dicey knew she was impatient for Maybeth. She tried not to nag at James, but she couldn't help asking him about every time she saw him, whether he had figured out how to teach Maybeth. What's the big hurry? He asked her. The year's a quarter through, Dicey said. The report cards were due out next week. They would get them handed out in a special homeroom at the end of the day next Tuesday. So what else is new? James asked. His question was impatient, but his eyes shone with an excitement inside him, as if nothing could really disturb him, not even Dicey's nagging. But even if you can find a way to teach her, she'll go slowly. You know that, James. There's no time to waste. I'm not wasting time. I'm thinking, he told her. Yeah, but what are you thinking about? Dicey snapped, and walked away before he could answer. She knew what he was thinking about that made him so happy, and she was glad for him. But this holding on that Graham had talked about was more complicated than she had thought. She had to hold on to James for what he wanted, and hold on to Maybeth for what she needed. That was fine, except for when the wants and needs were at cross purposes. At least Sammy seemed more cheerful, and was talking more and more about the kids in his class, as if he had time to notice them now. When Dicey returned from work on Thursday, her whole family, except for James, was in the kitchen. A thick silence lay all over the room. Graham sat quietly at the end of the big wooden table, her hands busy with yellow wool. She was rolling it up into balls, and Sammy was helping her by holding the wool. Maybeth had her head down, and her shoulders were shaking. Dicey dumped her books and asked, What's the matter? Maybeth kept her head down. Graham looked at Dicey and said, She won't say. Sammy answered at the same time, I don't know. She started crying when we got off the bus. Dicey went to kneel before Maybeth. Maybeth, what's the matter? Whatever it is, it's all right. Maybeth raised her face. Her hair hung down wet at the side of her face. Her eyes were red and swollen, her cheeks were wet, and her mouth quivered. She threw herself into Dicey's arms and kept on crying. Dicey patted her shoulder and rumpled the hair at the top of her round little head. I promise it's okay. Whatever, I promise, Maybeth, she said. You believe me, don't you? You know you can believe me. Sorry, that was my mom trying to walk quietly out the door. Let me find my place. Okay. Maybeth's head nodded. She took a big, shuddering breath and got up. She went to stand beside Graham where she could look at all of them. She twisted her hands in front of her. They all, she said in a voice so low and little Dicey almost couldn't hear. I didn't want to have to tell twice, she wailed. Her voice got stronger and her words came out choked and uneven. She was crying so hard she gulped in air and gulped out words that shuddered with her breath. When I read, every one, they laughed at me, and Mrs. Jackson couldn't make them stop, and I forgot everything. And she said they were unkind, and I couldn't make any words come out, and it was horrible. I don't know what to do. I don't ever want to go back there. In the middle of this, James came bursting in the doorway. His cheeks were red from the long ride in the cool air, and his eyes shone. As he listened, his face got quiet, thoughtful. They were all laughing whenever I made a mistake, and I kept making mistakes. I couldn't help it. James met Dicey's eyes. Dicey expected him to stick out his lower lip and look away, but he didn't. He nodded at her just once. She could see him thinking. She could see him beginning to understand how it was for Maybeth, and how she had to feel. She could see him being angry at himself for thinking it wasn't important. She could see him wondering what to say to Maybeth. Because I can't, Maybeth wailed. I can't read and I can't learn. Who says? James' cool voice cut across her tears. Everyone, Maybeth told him. She stood there, her shoulders heaving. You could see her stomach going in and out. She looked so fragile that Dicey was frightened and wanted to run out of the room. Graham and Sammy were sitting with frozen, unhappy faces. Only James looked unconcerned, but that was an act, Dicey knew. Who's smarter? James demanded of Maybeth. Everyone or me? I don't know, Maybeth mumbled. At least her sobs were dying down. James had her attention. Well, I know, it's me. And you know what I say? James asked her. Dicey wanted to hiss at James. Get to the point. But part of holding on was letting him do things his own way. Maybe, after all, he was right, because Maybeth looked up at him and shook her head no. Tears had stopped oozing out of her eyes, too. I say you can learn. I say I can teach you. And you know what else? Maybeth shook her head again. I'm going to, whether you want me to or not, so you better say yes. A little smile lifted the corners of Maybeth's mouth, like a wave licking at the shore. Have you ever known me to be wrong? James asked. He sounded so confident, Dicey almost believed him. Yes, Sammy shrieked, unable to bear the tension anymore. Lots and lots. At that, James grinned and shrugged. He kept his eyes on Maybeth, and she smiled back at him. Dicey thinks I can, he said. Do you? Maybeth asked. Really? Dicey nodded. All right, Maybeth said in a little voice. That's settled then, Graham announced. She began winding the wool again. Here's what we'll do, James told Maybeth. On Saturday morning, because I'll be in town, or maybe tomorrow night. If I ask, I bet Toby'll want to. We'll go to the library and I'll take out all the books on reading. Did you know there are dozens of different ways to teach it? Maybeth shook her head no. I asked Mr. Thomas. The reason there are so many ways is because there are so many different kinds of brains to learn. I think we'll have our first lesson on Monday after school. I have piano lessons on Monday, Maybeth protested softly. But her hands had stopped twisting. Okay, Sunday afternoon, and Monday afternoon after piano, James agreed. He looked all around at them and added, Sammy will have to take over my paper route. He can do it, Dicey, better than me because he's more careful. That's true, Sammy told her. He turned his face back to look at Graham. It is. Sounds all right to me. How's it sound to you, girl? Graham asked. Fine, Dicey said. She hoped James would be able to do what he had said he could. She could tell watching him that he was having the same doubts and the same hopes. Holding on was time-consuming, Dicey discovered. Well, she said to herself, pedaling out behind Sammy on Friday afternoon, watching him carefully throw the carefully folded papers onto doorsteps, noticing how he talked to barking dogs and rode alertly, using his ears as well as his eyes to watch traffic. You knew that. It was, after all, only what she had been doing as long as they could remember. It was also what she wanted to do. All right, guys, I'm going to stop there because it's starting to get dark, and I am really excited to read some more too. I hope it's still fun. I hope you guys are enjoying it. I know one of my viewers in particular is really stoked because this is her summer reading assignment and she doesn't have to buy the book now because she's listening to me read it. So honestly, you're motivating me to try to read it more regularly. We are about halfway through, maybe just a little less than halfway through now, but there's a lot of really important stuff coming up. So if you're enjoying this, please give it a thumbs up. Please stay tuned for more, and I will be back soon with more stuff. Bye, guys.